Welcome everybody. Today we are here to talk about the Hickey family, one of the pioneer families in Old Austin. Catherine Hickey here was born Catherine Quigley in Ireland. James Hickey, who she later married, was born also in Ireland. They came here in 1859. They left Ireland because of what the Irish called the Great Hunger, what we call the Irish potato famine, where over 1 million Irish starved to death. Another 1 million left the country. Anyway, they came to Austin. They were married in St. Patrick's Church on 9th and Brazos. Now, at that time, the Catholic Church was St. Patrick's because there were so many Irish in Austin. Later on, that church became St. Mary's Church and St. Mary's Cathedral, 10th and Brazos. Very pretty building. Anyway, they did quite well here in Austin. James came here as a stonemason, later on opened a grocery store. In 1875, they built a 2-story stone building on West 6th Street, 600 block. It cost them $3,000. The bottom floor was their grocery store, upper floor were their living quarters. The building is probably worth a bit more than $3,000 now, as that is where the Chase Bank building is. Anyway, between 1861 and 1877, they had 8 children. 5 of them died very young, and I'm going to tell you about them, and a son-in-law. First, we have on the far end, Catherine Hickey, or Kitty Hickey, died at 3 years old of apoplexy, is what the records say. It may not have been. Next to them is John Hickey, who died of the measles at 1 year old. Then we have John Hickey, who, the tall one there, was swimming in Barton Creek one day in 1874, got caught in a current and drowned despite heroic efforts to save him. Then we have Mary Hickey, the third from the end. Mary Hickey had met a young Irish immigrant carpenter named Patrick Duff. They quickly had a baby. They married, quickly had a baby in 1886, Mary Agnes Duff. 1887, she was pregnant again. This time, the baby died at birth, and Mary caught an infection and died 15 days later. So right now we have 4 of the Hickey children dead. 3 months after Mary died, James Hickey said to Catherine, "I don't feel well. I'm going to go see the doctor." He walked to the doctor's office. Before he got there, had a heart attack and died. 2 years later now, another tragedy for the Hickey family. Joseph Hickey on the far end there. Joseph Hickey, on the feast of St. Joseph, decided to go hunting. He went with 2 friends. They walked down East Avenue, now I-35, to the Colorado River. His 2 friends went fishing. He went hunting. At 5 o'clock, they were supposed to meet up and go home. When Joe Hickey didn't show up, the 2 boys went on home, but they checked at the Hickey residence, and Joe had not made it home. So they went out searching for him. They went out searching 3 times that night, including with 3 policemen, until 1:30 in the morning. They never found him. Early the next morning, they resumed their search, and they found Joe Hickey. Apparently, Joe Hickey had been crossing through a fence with his shotgun in his hands, in his arms, and it went off and blew off a part of his head, and he died instantly. The priest at St. Mary's said Joe Hickey was a good young man. Now, let's go back to Patrick Duff. Okay, remember I mentioned Patrick Duff married Mary Hickey, and Mary Hickey died. They had a child, Mary Agnes Duff. Let's fast forward to January 27, 1895. Was a cold, dreary, rainy Sunday in Austin, Texas. High temperature was 39, overcast, rained all day long. But it was a Sunday, so Patrick Duff went to Mass twice that day. He went to regular Mass and then High Mass. It seems that the custom among Patrick Duff and his friends was to, after church, go to one of the local watering holes and drink beer and play dominoes on Sunday afternoons. So after High Mass, Patrick Duff went to the Iron Front Saloon, which you probably heard of from Warren. It was once owned by the lawman and gunman Ben Thompson. But anyway, that's not part of this story. Warren's going to tell you that story. Charlie Ledbetter, a good friend of Patrick's, had already been at the Iron Front Saloon. He had already been drinking, and by the time Patrick got there, Charlie was drunk. He was so drunk, he was staggering, slurring his words, got into a fight with some friends. Some of his friends were trying to escort him out of the saloon. Patrick Duff saw his good friend Charlie Ledbetter and said to him, "Charlie, you are crazy." To which Charlie Ledbetter replied, "I'm not crazy. I'll cut you, Pat Duff." He pulled a knife out from his pocket, opened it up, started slashing wildly, caught Patrick Duff across the chest, severed an artery. Patrick Duff said to Charlie, "Charlie, you have cut me." And Charlie said back to Patrick, "No, I wouldn't cut you, my brother." Anyway, Patrick Duff never said another word on this earth. He turned white as a sheet, sat down, they laid him on a billiard table, and he passed away within 15 minutes. Charlie Ledbetter was arrested for murder. At the trial, he said he could not remember anything that happened the previous afternoon. He was so drunk. He ended up pleading guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 2 years in prison for the killing of Patrick Duff. He went to prison, was a good prisoner, no problems at all. His mother wrote a letter to the governor of Texas requesting a pardon, and it was full of all kinds of, makes you feel bad for her. Charlie was the only means of support for the family. Her husband was disabled. Charlie's sister was the only income, and she did laundry for $1 a week. Anyway, Charlie Ledbetter was pardoned after 1 year in prison, came back to Austin, married, did not have children, but became a contractor and lived until 1944, almost 50 years after his victim, Patrick Duff, had died. Now, Patrick Duff's daughter, Mary Agnes Duff, had now become an orphan because Mary Hickey and Patrick Duff were dead. There was a custody battle over her. She ended up living with Catherine Hickey until 1908, when she completed her nurse's training at Seton Infirmary, not Seton Hospital as we know it today, not Seton Ascension, but Seton Infirmary. There are not many graduates back then. And then one day she was out in front of her house and she saw this, what she said was a handsome young man ride up on a horse. She fell in love with him and ended up marrying him. That was Matthew Heap from Buda. Mary Agnes Duff and Matthew Heap became my grandparents.